Hi, this is Graham at letmebefree.com, and I just want to give you a quick introduction to Zone Trader Tutor, the expert advisor for MetaTrader that I've been developing over probably the last 3 or 4 years really. Here we have a Euro-dollar chart running the Zone Trader Tutor, and you see there's a whole number of zones being drawn on the chart which are representative of supply and demand. So mostly price is in an uptrend at the moment, so mainly we have demand zones underneath, although we have one supply zone which you can see is just touching and is giving some rejection at this time. Now we can flip through the time frames and we can see exactly the same things on the higher time frames. And if we look over to the left here, we have an indicator of what the trends are across all different time frames. So on a month we have a downtrend, so if we just flip over we can see, yep, that's very much a downtrend. In the week it's up, daily is up. Week has just sort of hit this line of support or demand at the moment, which is why it's saying uptrend. If we go to daily, you can see, yep, it's very definitely moving back into an uptrend now. So we can easily determine trend information just by looking at this across all the different time frames. Now, one of the main things that Zone Trader does is to identify any form of supply and demand you might see in the chart, and you might think that, well, there's a lot of lines on there and it can become confusing. So the beautiful thing about this is that it has a lot of filters that you can use to reduce the number of time frames based on various criteria you want. Typically, you might, for instance, want to focus on a bias. You may just want to set it up, or you may want to set it based on a higher time frame bias, or just on what's happening on the current time frame. So if we scroll down a little bit here, we can see that we have 4 separate bias settings. So we may just want to set the bias on a 1 hour or 4 hour chart based on what the daily trend is doing. So we set the bias to the daily trend. Of course, we just see here that the daily trend is up, so that means we should only get demand zones on any smaller time frames. So we just let this refresh. You can see that now the supply zone up higher has disappeared, and now we have demand zones only. And this is kind of typical of the sort of things that we can do with this expert advisor. Now, there's a lot more complexity behind it, and just to give you an example of some of the sort of smaller details, we can actually set this bias to only take effect for, say, the last 50 candles. Just OK on that. And what this means is that any zones which formed a long time ago still appear. And this is useful because you see here charts coming up here, and it might actually form a zone here, but you're not interested in that because it's happened way too recently, and you're actually interested in the much longer term trend. There's only if price has been away from this zone for a long time that you may actually want to use it as a target, for instance. So I'm just going to bring up the parameters and give you a little bit more idea of what you can actually see. We have two different methodologies of calculating the trend. The first one actually uses the zones themselves, which is the one I prefer and I tend to use exclusively. However, I know there are some more traditional traders and they may use things like a fast and slow moving average. So we can actually change it to use by the moving average, and then that literally looks at a fast moving average that defaults to 12 period EMA and a slower moving average, which is 10 period SMA. You can actually change the actual periods down here at the bottom, and there's quite a few other generic settings which you can change here at the bottom. So just moving down through the settings, we have the time frame for placing trades. Most of the top ones here are to do with trading, so you can actually trade on a time frame like the 1 hour, 30 minute. You could go down to the 5 minute, they don't recognize that, or if you're very long term you could even look at the daily. You can set buffers for your trading entries. You can say there's no selling above when price gets above a certain level, or no buying below a certain level. If I go down, just going to look slightly up. Now, some of you may be looking at the zones on the chart and thinking, yeah, these look a little bit big, possibly I'd want to push them up a little bit more. Well, you can do that. At the moment it's using the high and lows of the wicks, but you can actually push the entry levels up towards the base of the candle. That's done by a simple parameter here, place zone entries against candle bodies. So I set that to true. OK. Let it recalculate. And in this instance, the candle's just pressed a little bit closer up right up to candle bodies rather than using the wicks. Here's a good example where it's actually pushed down to the top of this body here rather than being at the top of the wick. Now I prefer to be at the top of the wick, that's a personal preference, but you can change it depending on how you want it to be. So I'm going to put that back to how it was, and then just scroll down a little bit further. So when you're trading, you can enter a lot of different target types. You can have fixed number R, where R is the distance in pips between your entry and the stop level of the zone. You can have fixed pips, you can just target a fixed price. You can say a next active zone, active being a zone that hasn't been removed by the filtering criteria you've applied, so it still appears on the chart. You can look at next zones on various time frames, so you may want to target a zone on the weekly time frame, but by trading the 1 hour chart, for instance. And then you can also set a minimum number of R's required or minimum target pips required. Obviously, if you have a fixed R, a fixed pip target, that's not really relevant, but if you're actually targeting a zone, an active zone, for instance, you may only want to choose trades where there's sufficient margin to be gained between the entry and the target zone you're aiming for. So I'm just going to scroll quickly through this. There's a whole lot of parameters. I don't have time to go through every single one, but I just want to give you a flavour. There is a manual online at book.letmebefree.com. We have a few technical indicators being brought into use here. So, for example, the Bollinger Bands, you can only trade if price is outside the Bollinger Band. I think Sam Seiden calls it the All-Star entry. The bonus here is that you can actually force that condition across a number of time frames, so not just one time frame, but maybe a higher time frame as well, just to add confidence to your trade. And similarly, you can have criteria whereby the RSI has to be at a level where it's considered overbought or oversold, and again on one or multiple time frames. Scrolling down a little bit further, you have time of day filters, so you can actually specify times for different sessions based on the server broker candle times, and you can actually, as well as setting a fixed target, you can actually force it to close at the end of various sessions, or when it hits an opposing Bollinger Band, for instance, or when it hits a moving average, or there's quite a number, and we are adding to these all the time. Scrolling down a little bit more, we've got some of the more static filters, such as the depth of a zone. You may not want to trade a very large zone because the risk is too high, so you can set a maximum depth, let's say, of 60 pips. Here you have the prior retests, so at the moment it's a very big number, so nothing gets removed, but you can just set, say, you're only allowed to have one prior retest. So if I just cancel this for the moment, you can see that there's a number on these zones. These numbers are actually the number of times that this zone has been retested. Here there's 0 because price has left and not come back. This one's 8 because it's come back lots of times, 8 times altogether. So maybe we want to get rid of these and only keep the ones that have got 0 on it, which is these 4. So what I will do is I'll scroll down, look for the prior retests, and let's say 0. So any one zones that haven't been retested yet. Okay, give it time to recalculate. And you see we're just left with these 4 here, which haven't been retested, and incidentally this supply zone up the top here, so this is obviously a fresh supply zone. You can see if we hold the mouse over it, it gives a little bit more information, including number of retests, where the next active zone is, and also where it is on the price curve. This is a slightly more advanced concept, which I'm sure those following Sam Seiden would be familiar with. I'll just scroll down a little bit further. We've discussed briefly the bias filters. Currently we're set to the daily trend. We can change these to weekly or monthly or just a higher time frame than the chart you're looking at. And you can sort of set multiple trends. So you could actually insist that price on the time frame you're looking at is aligned with the daily, the weekly and the monthly time frame, just trends, just to add further confidence. They obviously will reduce the number of trading opportunities you get. You've got various other technical filters, more Bollinger Band filters, which actually do the location of the zone in respect to the Bollinger Band. Price curve filters, you can define whether you're looking at the price curve on a particular time frame or just a higher time frame, and then say the minimum number of level that you want it to be, or number of pips available before it reaches the top of the time frame, or number of hours before it reaches the top of the time frame. So that's just one other way of filtering trades. Overlap filters, you can exclude any overlapping zones. I'm just going to come back and give a quick demonstration of that. What I would do is I will just reset this back to the default setting, just to get all the zones with no bias on it. Just OK it so it comes back. And what you see here, we've got overlapping zones here, 1, 2, these all overlapping. And what this will do, the inner overlapping zones, talks about, it will actually filter out all these ones that have got another one overlapping its top level and just leave the very outermost ones. This is probably a good example to look at here, where we've got 2 zones here and then this one, and the only one that's not overlapping the stop level is this one here. So if I just select it, overlapping zone, so it's true. Give a chance to recalculate, and you can see it just leaves this one outermost band left, and this is a good one to sort of trade from. You can see it actually comes back and tests this level lots of times. Didn't quite make it there, but tried it there, and that gives plenty of opportunities to get into this long trade up to this old supply level here, which would give a risk reward of about sort of 3 or 4 probably. So not a bad effort there. So if I quickly just resume back to the parameters, we've got a few other only zone overlappings. For example, only zones with entry inside another zone. The idea being that if an entry is inside a zone, then a lot of the orders will have been already absorbed at the entry to the first zone, making the second zone, overlapping zone, much more high probability, or only zones that fall inside a higher time frame zone. I'm just going to get it back to where we were in the first place. Intro. OK, to reset it. Give it a quick 5 seconds or so, and then scroll down to the bottom. Here we've got various filters that's to do with the price move, so you may only want to trade when there's a certain amount of pips left in the day, so maximum daily move in pips. So if the daily move is being exceeded, then zones won't be displayed or trades won't occur. You've got order limits, so you may not want to place more than one order against a particular zone or in the duration of a particular candle, or even on a time frame or for a symbol. So you can control that using these numbers here. Stop management, you can now say no stop if you really want to do that. I don't recommend it, but there may be occasions. And you can actually use trailing stops, which are based on zones. This is an interesting concept. In fact, what would happen is if we see we've got trailing number of zones forming behind price as it moves in this uptrend, this will actually move the stop behind each new zone as it forms, and the zone gives it a certain level of protection. And obviously if it comes back and drops behind past that stop level, that's trading top level, then the trade will be closed and you'll minimize your risk. Scroll down a little bit further just to get the last one or two. So we've also got full position sizing here. You can use a fixed lot size, or you can use a calculated amount based on percentage of the risk of percentage of your account you want to risk, and things like a cap on lot size just to ensure that you don't go over a certain amount. And then you've got various display customizations, so you can sort of hide these indications over here if you're not interested in them. You can have various combinations of zone displaying on one time frame, so childhood one smaller time frame, childhood daily I showed you earlier, or even just a weekly only. Let's say weekly only. Okay, that. Oops. Child with weekly. Weekly only. Thought that's a bit strange. Weekly only. You see you're on the 1 hour chart, but you see the weekly zones. Oh, same with the daily. So it's just a different way of projecting the higher time frame zones onto a smaller time frame chart without cluttering it up too much. Just come back and show you the very last few we have here. So one useful factor is if you want to know why certain zones are disappearing, you can actually display those zones in a thinner line. Now I may have to change the display, so what I'll do is I'll get rid of that weekly level and put child only, which is where we start from. Okay, I'll come back to the 1 hour, as is often easy to see, and have apply a filter just to remove some of those zones. Let's just have an up bias, a manual up bias, so we should only see demand zones. And you see these ones have actually gone to very thin, which means that they're inactive and you won't be able to trade against them if you turn on auto trading, or you can just ignore them with your manual trading. And you can see if I hold the mouse over it, it says inactive reason bias 1. So it generally gives you a clue as to why a zone isn't active. So that's really a whistle-stop tour of the Zone Trader Tutor. I hope it's given you some idea what it's capable of. Obviously this is a very short video and I can't go into all the detail, but I will be producing some more videos to sort of give details on how parameters can be used to set up your own strategies and then implemented using auto trading that the expert advisor will do for you. Thank you for your attention and I look forward to hearing from you soon. Don't remember, go to letmebefree.com if you want to get a trial version of this expert advisor and give it a try for free, no obligations, for a whole month. Thanks very much. Bye.